This is my email address right here, ptaggart@ggwo.org. I'm very good with email. I'm not so good with you grabbing me in the hallway and giving me something to remember, because I won't when I get to my office. There's been a little bit of concern expressed by some of you about you haven't done the prerequisite material yet. As long as you get to it at some point, don't feel bad about it. We'll get through this, and but you can do it before or after, whenever you get to it is fine. So don't worry about that. And all this stuff is available. Like for my for the undergraduate course, we have a Google site for that, and then for this course there's a Google site. Like I said, those are all public, but just how you find it, I don't know. So if you email me, I'll send you the link, and then you'll have it, and the material will be there. And even if you're, Pastor Tony was asking, he's not taking this for credit, but is that material there? It's there. And then the other thing is, just so you know, for you, I guess for anybody, I spent probably my weekend. See, just to prep for this course, I don't know. I spent some months just taking a bunch of notes. That's this right here. And then I spent my weekend sort of trying to take those notes and translating into like an outline of the course, just so I could follow it sort of in logical order. These are not typed up, but I can probably get these photocopied tomorrow and hand them out to you. Or if someone wants to, felt like they wanted to type them up, that would just let us know. That would be awesome. So that will help you, I think, with all this stuff. I don't like handing out outlines, because I feel like sometimes if I give an outline, people turn you off and just look at, oh yeah, I got that. And but I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to take the risk and give it to you as soon as I have it, and just so you kind of know where this thing is going. So I think that's one more thing, just while I'm thinking of it. So how many people eat dinner before you get here at 5 o'clock? Does anybody? Laura does, and Gina does. I'm wondering if like the first break, like Tuesday, like Wednesday evening, there's no class, right? It's just Wednesday morning. So we got Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. I wonder if we should plan to have the first break be like a half-hour break or a long one, so you can eat dinner here, and maybe make it 35 or 40 minutes, just so you can get in line and get however that goes. And then the second break will be shorter. So that's how we'll do it Tuesday and Thursday and Friday night. Okay, so bring your lunch or dinner rather, or buy it at the cafe. So that's how we'll do it. So before I proceed, anybody want to say anything? Okay, so I just spent a bunch of time talking about the nature of leadership, pastoral leadership, the ministry of the pastor in Greater Grace churches. Now, remind me why I spent time on that. What was my purpose in putting that out there? Okay, go ahead, Pastor Bob.
Well, you were going to talk about the board, and
yeah, start over again. Sorry, there's the mic.
Okay, yeah, you were going to talk about the board and its function, and then how you can have conflict between the pastor and the board.
Okay, everybody got that? That's why I'm talking about this. This is not a course in pastoring a church, but it's church government, church leadership, and this becomes, thank you for that. Okay, now, so the Greater Grace kind of model for how the pastor functions has some strengths to it, and it has some weaknesses to it. It has upside and downside. John, could I just ask you just to close that door, just because I'll get distracted by people in the hallway. So what are the maybe the strengths of the GGWO model? Why is it a good model? So the strengths. Okay. And again, I'm not saying this is a definitive list, but just in terms of what comes to my head, and you can throw some stuff in there also. It brings in accountability. Okay, accountability. It brings in maybe like authority. The strength of the greater grace model of pastoral leadership that we just finished talking about. We got a strong pastor who has a lot of very good qualities that we respect. Like what are the strengths of that type of pastor leadership?
What do you mean by accountability?
What I mean is that, like, because I have tremendous respect for this man, okay, when he gives definition or communication, right, because of my respect for him, and also because he has the rule over me, wherever that was, and I think in Hebrews, that there's a relationship there. Like I can't, if I just go out and do whatever the heck I want, there's someone in my life that, like, it's going to bother me. You know what I'm saying? If I go out and start raising Cain or going against what's taught. So that's what I mean by with a strong pastor, there's accountability, as opposed to a pastor who's just like my buddy, What would another strength be? I would say another strength would be like there's order in the church, okay? It's clear that someone's in charge, and then that brings in, in the administration of the church with, different departments, however that's working. We know that there's a bottom line here, and it's helpful. It's not every man for himself, everybody doing what's right in their own eyes. And maybe to put it in a broader sense, we're receiving, with a strong, powerful pastor. I hope I said that the right way. Is what I would call the fourfold ministry. Okay, and when I talk about that, I'm talking about the different sort of biblical words that the Bible has for the pastor. So there's the word poimen, which is the Greek word for shepherd, that's translated as pastor. You've got the word the didaskalos, which is the teacher. Okay, you've got the presbyteros, which is the older man, and the episkopos, which is the overseer. All right. So those ministries are like given by God. They're in the Bible. They're part of they're the pastoral ministry, and those are all there for a reason. And I'm receiving them all because the pastor is in that place and he has that respect and office and position where he can do that. So he is pastoring me like he's caring about my life. He is teaching me, okay, and he is overseeing the church. All right. The episkopos, and then he's an elder. Like he has wisdom. In addition to those other things, he has the wisdom of an older man in my life. And so it frees him up to have towards his congregation the ministry that's going to be effective and needed for them. And if I understand that, I'll be receiving that ministry also. And our country, United States, is a very, very anti-authority place. The only place where authority is respected is, on sports teams. People do what the coach says because it works. And it works in the church and it works in other places, but we don't receive it. And then we, in business also, because if you don't do what the boss says, he won't be your boss for very long. But yeah.
That you mentioned an elder. Does it have to do with age or not at all?
I'll give you my opinion, Helen. I haven't studied that out myself. And actually this spring I'm going to teach ecclesiology, and we're going to spend a lot of time on that. But how I view it is that there would be wisdom that would be characteristic of, but not limited to, a person who is getting on in years, and I think we'll teach it. I don't know if I hit it in the notes this week, but the way I think this will come up again, but I'm going to say it now because you're asking, is that the way we view elders as like the overseeing, the term elder, we kind of view that as an inclusive term, all right, that includes the body of leadership of the church. whether they're evangelists or pastors or teachers or, or overseers. That, so the way Pastor Stephen said is he believes that all pastors, all ordained people are elders, all right? And of course, we ordained some pretty young guys in this church. I know we got to be careful with that, all right? So these would be like what I would say like the strengths of having or the strengths or the benefits of having the type of pastoral leadership that we have. It's why we're here. This is the result. Now, I also think that there can be, I don't want to call it a weakness, maybe a pitfall is a better word. Better word than weakness. I'm going to use the word pitfall, even though in my notes I used the word weakness. And the reason I use that word is it's something bad that could happen. It doesn't have to happen, but it could. And we want to be aware of it. And what you're dealing with is both the pastor and the congregation members. And they can start to take, the rightful position and role their pastor would have, but they can go too far with it, okay? And you can start having like this activity which is more around, like people are not, like the congregation is not individualized in Christ, all right? They don't know who they are, and maybe you have a pastor who's charismatic or has a good personality, and people will misreceive the leadership, and they will start to identify the relationship with God, like with their relationship with the pastor. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? I think that makes good sense. So I start to look to him to provide things in my life that are beyond his office, and I start to try and get from him things that really God should be doing in my life, which might be like, advice or direction. Of course, we're available for direction, but I suppose in a rare situation, I might go to a pastor and ask him, geez, what do you think about me buying this car? I think most pastors are going to say, you know what, you make that decision with God, unless you had a young guy who didn't know what he was, I don't mean the pastor, but a young body member. They well, do you have enough money to do it? No, I was going to borrow the money from my brother. Well, what do you need the car? Like maybe someone doing something very, very unwise, you might jump into that situation. But usually it's like, I don't, as a pastor, I don't know what you should be doing with your life. I don't have that information. Like, why would God tell me that? Why wouldn't he tell you? But people can misread it. They can look to the pastor to start having to fill voids in their life. I don't have any friends. Well, the pastor's my friend. And some of that can be true. In some ways, pastors are professional friends, because there are people that don't have friends, and they find that in the body from somebody because they're just awkward, social, whatever it is. But it can just get overdone, and then you can have, like, on the side of the pastor, like all guys, like every, I don't know about women because I don't know how women think, but that was a joke, but it's true. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you for laughing. All right, now.
You mean you do know how women think?
But I know how guys think, and it is, it goes like this. Guys have egos. And when I start having an effect and a influence on people, I can start to enjoy it. All right, oh, this is amazing. Like I'm affecting people's lives. This is great. And God is in it at some level, right? So I start identifying the effect I'm having on people's lives with the work of God in their life. And as long as it's the same thing, maybe it's awesome. But when that starts to diverge a little bit, and then I don't have influence in someone's life that I'd like them to, Like, I preach, hey guys, like, I guess VJ, you're sitting there, so you're my target, so I'm a pastor. Hey VJ, it's great having you in church on Sunday morning. Like, thank God for your life. You're a faithful man. Would you consider coming to church on Sunday night also? It'll change your life. I'd love to see you there. It'd be awesome. You know what I'm saying? So maybe once in a while you'd say that to someone in your church. Maybe not very often, or depending on who you are and what your ministry is, maybe you say it a lot to people, or maybe you preach it from the pulpit. But then VJ doesn't do it, all right? And now, because I have an ego, right, as a man and as a pastor, it starts to bother me that guy doesn't respect me the way he should, all right? I gave him some advice. He didn't listen to me. Doesn't he realize the negative spiritual effects of going against counsel, right? So this whole thing gets going now, all right? And I can't leave it alone. I can't put it back in the hands of God and pray and trust God for his timetable for VJ's life. Instead, I start to take this like as a challenge to my leadership. And if I'm insecure, which men are insecure, all right, I start to be like, it starts to bother me. Maybe I don't have the ministry I thought I did. Maybe I thought I was something with God, and now this effect I've been having has reached a dead end or a brick wall in VJ's life. So what am I going to do about it? So I start, maybe attacking him from the pulpit, start getting guys together and talking about VJ, and he's not going to make it with God, that type of thing. All right. So, and this is what can happen. Okay. Go ahead, Pastor. No, don't be sorry. Your job is to talk.
But another thing that I've seen, and it's kind of to one of the points you made, but a pastor can get to the point to where he separates himself from the people.
Right.
Because of, if you want to talk to this person, you know what I'm saying, and isolates himself because he has more important things to do or something,
right.
Maybe. You know what I'm saying? So.
Right.
I've seen that happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things on this subject, one of the things that really I appreciated a few years ago from Pastor Schaller, it was in a message, and he sort of paused in the middle of the message, and he said, by the way, maybe some people would say, and I'm not quoting directly, I'm like paraphrasing. I remember it very, very clearly. He said, maybe some people would say, Pastor Schaller, you will never disappoint us. Right. And he said, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And God will make sure, because if there's this interdependency that's beginning, and he senses it, and that's what I thought, the reason I mention it is I thought of it, like I think that he's very discerning, and if he sees it, then he'll deal with it in a very almost humorous way, but to hopefully to keep it from happening. Not only to like deal with it after the fact, but maybe to deal with it before it really gets rolling.
Yeah. So God help us with this thought. Pastor Stevens used to talk about personality rapport. You know what I'm saying? How many people ever heard him say that? Half of us have, maybe 2/3 of us have. And that's where my relationship with another person is based on, mutual interest, mutual, personality compatibility. It's not a doctrinal relationship. So I have, I start to develop some sort of rapport, with the pastor. And I think it's like God is in this. Hey, he's my friend. I respect the pastor. I want to be close to him. And then it can go the other way also, So, where the pastor starts to use his personality rapport to get you to do stuff that I want you to do. Like, I want you to come to church, so I start using, you're the target again, VJ here, because, so I start using that to influence people in a way I want them to go, And so this is like I'm not saying it's the downside. I don't know, but these are potential pitfalls that can happen with a very strong pastor who his teaching, his ministry is really where the attention of the church is. Of course it's on Christ, but it's that person's like very, very, very important. Yeah, go ahead. Andy, thank you so much for doing this.
Speaking about the pitfall and the role of a pastor, it seems that a pastor is like bound to offend, at some point or the other. Like there's like ego on one side. It could you just finished with this phrase, like wanting to influence a certain, like a congregation member in the way that he wants that person to go, let's say. So on one side, like ego, and on the other side, it could be genuine care for a person. But you can never say, so on the pastor's side, he's maybe he knows already, I'm bound to offend. But on the congregation member's side, he might have to he'll reach a place where he has to jump over that barrier and then continue, or when that happens, kind of a thing.
Yeah, and I think that it not that it could happen, but it has to happen in a church, that we will all, we're all going to bump into things in life that bother us. You know what I'm saying? We come to a church, people, stuff's going to be said from the pulpit, all sorts of stuff is going to happen that I wish it were different. It's going to bother me, and growth is just making these decisions where, okay, I'm walking with Christ. This does not matter. I'm going to go forward. And God, like you said, not I might offend you, I will offend you, because God will, and I won't do it on purpose, hopefully, but God will bring in these situations that maybe no offense was intended or meant or even given, but God allows it to happen so that we can grow and be on a firm, on the foundation that can't be shaken, and everything else is shaken. Okay? So this is sort of the, like I say, we get the strength of the strong pastor, the way we run, the way we lead our churches, and then there's pitfalls to it also that can happen with the congregation. Now, so then the question becomes, all right, with the pastor really leading the church, with him being the man of God that we believe is hearing from God, with wisdom for the body, who, if anybody, is in a place where the pastor can be checked or corrected, or whatever word you want to use it? Is there anybody who can keep that pastor, back on track when he starts to make missteps? Okay. Now, how do we handle that? What do we do? Does this bother me? I mean, in a sense, it does bother me. It's like I don't. Like now we're touching something. I had a good conversation with Luis just between there. Do pastors ever need correction? Do they ever need admonishment? Whatever it is, who can give it? And if that happens, am I touching the ark? Is God going to strike me dead because I'm fooling around with His man? So when we look in the Bible. What sort of leadership do we see? And first of all, I was thinking about the Old Testament, just going through some of those examples. I do not, one of my many is I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of the Bible. I've got, some people are far better probably people in this room far better in the Bible than I am. But who could correct Abraham? Who slowed him down? Well, his wife did, right? Abraham, hearken to your wife, listen to her, And then there was another situation where, I forget the name of the king, but where Abraham lied about his wife, and the king says, what on earth are you doing? The guy had words for Abraham. You've jeopardized my whole country because of what you've done here, I was thinking about Moses, and Moses was corrected by his father-in-law, right? Like Moses is getting weary because he's doing all this. People are lined up at the door every morning to be counseled or counseled by Moses, and he's becoming exhausted doing it. And his father-in-law comes to him and says, look, you cannot do this. Appoint some men to do it. And it seemed good, and that's what Moses did. He listened to counsel. So there was somebody who could speak to him, and he listened. And then another situation, his sister corrects him because he marries somebody, right? Marries the Ethiopian woman. His sister corrects him, and she gets in big trouble from God for that, right? So Jethro was speaking from God. Miriam was not, and she paid for that, almost with her life, but not, okay? Saul had the prophet Samuel to speak to him, all right? David had Nathan to speak to him. But something that's very interesting in each of these situations with these different counselors or correctors, whatever you want to call it, of the man of God, the people who brought the correction could give the advice, right? But the leader didn't have to take it, right? The leader, Moses could have said, no, Jethro, I'm going to keep on doing it myself. I'm doing it my way. And that probably would have been the end of the matter. Moses would have paid the price for it, but there was that was the end of the line, okay? Now, what I see in the New Testament, I see a little bit different. And the other thing I would say is that I do not believe that the New Testament has like an exhaustive or definitive statement to make about church organization. There's certain things that are crystal clear, but when we start addressing the subject that we're talking about tonight, the Bible is not a textbook about it. There's examples in there that we can look at and, gain principle from and glean from. Different people have interpreted these principles in different ways. All right, you could say, look at this verse. This is exactly what it means. That's the only way it can be. Yeah, but look at this verse. What about this verse over here? We could look at it this way. And just maybe an example you might think about is the example of after they have to replace Judas, right? Who's going to be the 12th person here? So they have to replace him, and the apostles get together. I think they drew straws, right? Isn't that how it went? Okay, so I can take that verse. What do I do with that? I can interpret that and say that is a legitimate way of determining God's will. And I think there's Old Testament. There was they threw lots or something at times also to make decisions. And I could make that into a doctrine and say that's how we're going to run our church. Now, I don't think anybody does that. I mean, maybe I do it in my own life. But in terms of church government, well, sometimes I do. Sometimes it's like not quite flip a coin, but God, I don't know what to do. God, what do you want me to do? So anyway, but maybe a stronger model that we would look at more would be the what we would call the Jerusalem Council. And let me just see if I have. Let me just flip over to one other place here. We're not going there right now, but just to tell the story, I read it in the last 72 hours. Correct me if I'm wrong here. Paul is in Antioch with some of the disciples there. People come up from Jerusalem and start preaching the law, right? Like Gentiles have to be circumcised, I think is what it was. And Paul says, what is going on here? And then he goes down to Jerusalem, right? And there's this big meeting there, the Jerusalem Council. It's, in church history, it's called the Jerusalem Council. And there is a discussion that happens, all right? And different points of view are exchanged. People listen, all right? They listen to each other's point of view. Paul makes his point. And then it's like very interesting. What happens next? Who is it that pronounces what the final word is? Anybody remember? James, okay? So James says, this is the way it's going to be, okay? So that tells me, like I see a model of leadership in Jerusalem there, where there is a spokesman and a final word, right? That tells me James was a leader of that church, you know? But the decision was made by a group of people that came together, exchanged points of view, some with some vigor behind it, you know, frank exchange of views, and then they consider the whole matter, and then the answer is given, all right? Now, is that the place where he talks about things strangled in blood? That's okay? And then he sends out this thing where, we're not going to have to circumcise the Gentiles, but we just ask that you stay away from things that are strangled and from blood, all right? Now, so that's the word that goes out there, but we don't take that as a doctrine. I mean, we don't have a rule in our church that if there's blood involved, you can't eat it. I mean, I don't, but it's not like a rule in the church, right? If you killed an animal by strangulation, could you eat it? Yeah, no, I mean, it's gross, but we wouldn't think about it, you know what I'm saying? So we're like picking and choosing some things out of the Bible. This is definitive, and this isn't definitive. This is not definitive. Of course, it's based on other, we're comparing Scripture with Scripture. But I'm just saying two things. Number one, the New Testament does not give all this clarity on it. It does give patterns that we can glean from and learn from and apply as best we can. But it also definitely gives room for group decision making, right? There's numerous times where people come together, have a discussion, and this is the consensus. This is what we're going to go with. That is definitely there, yes, sir. And maybe we'll keep the mic over here because there's more chatter coming from this direction.
I mean, not to disagree, but I mean, yes, there is some, in comparison to the overwhelming amount of stories in the Bible about individual leaderships. I mean, from Genesis all the way to Revelation, it's one gigantic story about individuals who were spiritual and who were led by God, like 90% of it. And then we have a few examples in the New Testament of boards and groups. I mean, so I personally believe that, like you mentioned earlier in the class, that there's room for it, yes, but they are to be more invisible in a sense and to be used as counsel just based on that fact alone. It's overwhelmingly so that Paul led and that Peter led and that David led and that 100 other guys led primarily by themselves with God's leading. I mean, so to me it's stretching a little bit to say that there is room. I'm not disagreeing, absolutely, not against boards, of course, but more in a counsel way and just to make sure that we're not making a mistake. But at the end of the day, God's looking for individuals to lead us. And to be a pastor, just point number two, to be a pastor, criteria number one is that you are very spiritual. I mean, to put it in the simplest form. We could talk about it for an hour, and that's hard to find, if we're honest. And the more people you get involved, the harder that's going to be. Like, if you take one person that is a spiritual leader, then you're going to be fine. If you need 12 people to lead you, that's going to be even harder. If you go to a congregational church and you need a couple of hundred people to be spiritual to lead you, that's going to be even more harder. I mean, so I'm just making an argument here that, I agree, but I like the way we do it. I like the way we do it because it seems more biblical to me, to me anyways. Maybe you have another comment on it.
So I'm sorry, I'm going to grab the microphone, but I don't need to. Yeah, so I think, Pastor Pete, you're hitting, like, the way you're responding to it, you're sort of hitting the crux of the matter. You know what I'm saying? How do we have a man of God leading the church? And at the same time, how do we, I don't like using the word checks and balances, but, is there a mechanism or a break on unfettered, unrestrained leadership? That's the thing. And there's different ways it happens in the Bible. Sometimes, in the Old Testament, it's the prophet, who's speaking with the voice of God. In the New Testament, you also have to look at the context. And are we going to talk about this tonight or further on this week? What I don't want to do is get into a debate at all tonight about what the Bible. I'm not doing that. You know what I'm saying? But what I will say is, you look at the context of what happens in the New Testament. All right, and like we've got a church in Jerusalem that seems to be a larger church and seems to have there's a lot of guys there. They haven't all been scattered. You know what I'm saying? Some of the heavy hitters are right there. You know, and then a lot of the New Testament is missionary enterprise, right? Where Paul is going to places, right? And there is nobody else there. Or as you know, these are small churches in the New Testament. These are not churches of 1,000 people. These might be churches of 10 and 20 and 30. We don't know at that point in time exactly how big they were. So you've got Paul there, who founded the church in many cases. And then you've got a pastor there, or maybe a handful of guys. We're not sure what it is, but this is the thing. So do we have a model of leadership where the pastor is the final word and everything, or how do we set it up so that there is some sort of whatever you want to call it? Is there anybody around this guy who has some say when he gets off base? Who guards the church? All right? Well, the pastor does. But I mean, okay, but has anybody ever been in a church where the pastor got off? You know what I'm saying? Yes, I get some nods going on out there. What happens? All right? Is the congregation going to leave? Or are there people there? Is there a time when the pastor should leave? Because go ahead, sir. Yeah, send that mic back.
All right. One thought that just came, by the way, and you may talk about it later, but one issue related to the church, at least in the United States, is whether or not the pastor is the final ecclesiastical authority in the church. Because that can address issues that come up in the church that people challenge the way the church operates or not.
Right.
And if your bylaws are set up so that the pastor is the final ecclesiastical authority, if it ever goes to court, the court will come to the pastor and say, how should this be done?
Right.
Because they can't tell the church how to operate.
Right.
So it's an important issue.
Yeah.
From that perspective.
Yeah, and I haven't gotten through all the material yet. Everybody hang in there, all right? But if this is a little bit uncomfortable, all right, good, because it can be uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable, and that's one of the purposes of this. Let's face it now. Let's realize what the issues are. Get a way to think about it, and not wait until the crisis comes, and then start having crazy situations because we didn't expect it, didn't prep for it, don't know what's going on. Okay, so does the pastor have peers? Are there people that can counsel him? Is there some way to do it that allows the spiritual leadership that Pastor Pete is talking about, which we all want, but at the same time doesn't leave the congregation at the mercy of a guy who can go off the deep end, all right? And I'm saying this, that there is no perfect answer to that question, all right? I know how we do it. We do it, what we do for a certain way. It may not be the right answer, but it's the best one we've come up with, okay? There's no way to guarantee there's going to be a spiritual outcome in every situation because you're dealing with people, right? If you have an unlimited pastor who can do whatever he wants, he can make bad decisions. If you have a board running things, they can make bad decisions. They can resist the man of God. This is life. Okay, you are or have been or will be in this situation where these issues become very, very, very important. But going back to the final, maybe pitfall of having a very strong pastor in a local assembly is, does he start valuing his strong position so much that he ends up in a place where he has no peers, where there is nobody in his life who can talk to him? All right? And, of course, Moses, it was his wife spoke to him. But if the only guy who can slow the pastor down in a church is his wife, that's probably not the best situation, right? You know, who are these other people who can help him, who can you know, when he starts, you know, going off the deep end, can step in and assist and support and probably save the church in that situation. Everybody understand that? I know you're not jumping up and down screaming right now like this is the greatest thing in the world, but this is where it is, okay? Now let me go back to, you'll like this right now. What is the sources, like where am I getting my material for this class? Like, did I just make this up? Some of it I did. Like, yes, I did just make it up. But here's what it is. Here's the sources of authority. Number one is the Word of God. What information is there that's going to help us, that's going to show us some things, right? Number two, what works? What works? Does leadership by committee work? No, not very well, you know. Leadership by council, but with something having a final word, that works well, right? But where everything's a vote, doesn't work so well. Number three is the legal environment. You know, Pastor Bob alluded to it, but different countries, things are different. And you know, we're in one situation in the United States, you're in another situation in different European countries. There's some countries in the world where you can't even have, like, churches are illegal. That's another situation. I think it's a different situation in Africa where the government, you know, it depends what country you're in, West Africa, East Africa, I don't know. So that's going to be have an effect on how you set your church up. This next thing, get this, is the pastor's gift, his leadership style, his preference. What kind of environment is that pastor willing to work in? What can work for him? Because that's going to determine how it goes, and even if you set something up, will it be effective or will it be ineffective because the pastor cannot work with it? And then the fifth one, which I mentioned, you know, after Pastor Pete commented, was the size of the church. Like, who is actually in this church? If it's one guy opening up the Bible in front of 3 people and that's the church, you only have so many people there, right? If it's a church of 1,500 people with 70 pastors like we have in Baltimore, it's a different situation, all right? And so all these different things determine what's going to work, what's not going to work, how you're going to handle a specific situation. And it's good to recognize this because there's maybe not a one-size-fits-all ideal solution, all right? Okay, so the pastor can get very comfortable, like here he is. Let's make him a triangle, all right? And he can get very comfortable downloading and giving definition to the congregation. And I spent a half an hour talking about that's exactly why we're here, because we want that from the man of God, okay? But can he get so comfortable in this situation that if he's got people around him, right? Different guys with a level of maturity and a level of wisdom, can he be comfortable sitting in this situation and receiving from those people, or will he take it as a challenge to his ministry? All right? So what we would say, the way it is playing out in Greater Grace World Outreach is that without losing the power of the pastor, we want pastors who are comfortable in a place where they're entreatable, where they can listen, where they can hear an opinion and not take it as a challenge, but take it as a help, and receive the wisdom of other spiritual people to aid him in his decision-making process. All right? My goal, like we've got guys here who are pastors, we've got guys who are pastoring, we've got guys here who want to be pastors, who may be pastors, who want to go on them. We've got all sorts of people in this room. And I don't want young guys going out there and learning to pastor a certain way. Number one, being wimps and just, whatever everybody wants, I'll do it. I just want to make everybody happy. We don't want that because you lose the power of the ministry. But we also don't want them so in awe of their own gift and their own leadership that they lose the ability to listen and to be corrected and to get help from people. Okay, everybody understand that? This is like very, very important. Now, I'm just going to take a quick poll. Pastor Ken, does your church have a board of elders? Yes. Who's on that board? Who do you want to name? Yes. The names of the people? Of the board of your board of elders.
Yeah, we got religious deacons that are set up of 4.
Okay, but your church has a legal board, and you got 4. You're one of. There's 3 other guys besides you. Okay, and those guys are really deacons. But yeah, okay. And Pastor Tony, tell me about your church in Geneva.
There are 2 of us. I was one of them. Christian's the other, Christian Martinez.
Okay,
We were looking to get a 3rd eldering, so that's something that we're working on now.
okay,
When I come back. So at the moment, it's kind of
right,
not an ideal situation, but it's what was left after my pastor left.
right,
So kind of that's how we're playing it.
yeah. Pastor Bob.
We have a board of directors. We have no elders as of yet.
Okay,
A board of elders.
okay.
We're supposed to have one, but we don't have it.
Are you one of the directors?
Yes.
Okay. Pastor Stan, do you even have a church? What do you have?
Yeah, well, we haven't named elders, but we do have 3 guys, 3 men there who I talk about the decisions with.
Right. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Anybody else? Pastor Sam?
Yeah, we do. 5 elders. But we have 2 kind of like boards. The first one is has people that actually don't stay like in Uganda, but are just like in charge in East Africa, and members here, some members here are part of that board.
Right.
And then there is also a local church board.
Right. Okay.
So there are 2.
Yeah. And does the upper board, does that supervise a bunch of churches in Uganda?
Yeah.
Okay. And that is that a government requirement that you do it that way, or is that the way you guys do it?
Yes, the government requires.
Okay, all right. So, listen, here's what you just heard, everybody, all right? I'm not sure about Uganda, but the other pastors that spoke, did I leave anybody out? Anybody out? Other pastors in this room? The first 4 guys who talked, no one has like what we would call like an ideal situation. You know what I'm saying? And that's by admission. We're supposed to have it, but we don't. And this is not a rebuke at all. Don't take it that way. It's not that. It's just what you're dealing with is with small churches, all right? You're doing what you can with what you have, and we understand that. And so that this is not Pastor Taggart saying shape up. It's not that at all. But it is making you and us aware of the dynamics so we know the situation we're in, so that we can be accountable and be aware of this as we make decisions, and maybe find some way to, even though the situation isn't perfect, what can we do to mitigate or to make this to make up for the situation we're in? Everybody get that? I think Pastor Ken. Now you correct me if I get this wrong, but what you said is that they're more like deacons, right? Yeah. So are these, and what I would want every man to have is to have men. I don't know if those are the guys to do it. I think they're good men, and they're very good men. I don't know them, but I don't doubt at all that they're great guys. But I'm saying what every pastor needs is other men of God who are his peers, not who are his subordinates, even though they might be, subordinate in the church in terms of you're the pastor. But you need guys who can truly counsel you, come alongside you, bear your burden, and have the wisdom and the experience to truly provide us with the help we need in time of crisis. We need to be getting that from somewhere, because if we don't, we're on our own. Me and God is awesome, but God's perfect, I'm not, and I can start to react. I can do certain things in situations because of insecurity, and I can start engaging in behaviors to hold the whole thing together that can be self-destructive or destructive for the church. That's what this is all about, guys. All right? At Greater Grace World Outreach, Pastor Schaller does not have all power, okay? He can be voted down by his own board of elders. He's one vote on a board of 11 men right now. Now, is he the chairman of that board? Yes, he is, because of his respect that he has among those men, because of his position in the church. They, generally speaking, they follow his leadership, but they don't have to. He can be voted down. Everybody understand that? Is that ideal? It's the best we've figured out how to do on planet Earth, okay? It's possible that Pastor Schaller could be speaking from God, and other guys say, no, we don't want to do that, and God's plan could be voted. It could happen. And that's why I'm saying there's no ideal. All right, now let me let's open up the floor. Go ahead, guys. Let's hear it before I move on here. I don't want to shut this down. Anybody else want to say anything about this? Yes, sir. Let's get the microphone back. Yeah, okay.
Okay. I don't know what I want to say. I guess from our perspective, we have a board of directors, and on our board of directors, there are 4 pastors. Okay. And we have a process that if something is detected in the church that someone doesn't, something can't be addressed properly in their mind, there's a provision. In fact, we have a board of appeals, right? Kind of thing. Very similar to Baltimore from that perspective, okay?
Yep.
To address things. So you would hope they never get that far, right? That you would hope that someone would say, hey, can we sit down and talk about this? I'm not sure about this or something. You know what I'm saying? But we have that as kind of like a final kind of thing. Okay. So anyway.
Yeah, and the new information I just got, Pastor Bob, is that these men are ordained pastors.
Yes. Yeah.
Big difference.
Yes.
From just a guy who has an insurance company and you put him on the board. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Big difference.
Yeah.
Because there's a spiritual battle going on, and you got to have guys who are there with you who are equipped for that battle.
Right.
Otherwise, they're going to act like businessmen or good guys or whatever. They're going to make good, natural decisions, and it's not going to help.
Well, and then when I come across a challenging situation, it's like, of course, I pray about it, but then I almost always go to someone on our board of directors and explain the situation and get their view of things to try to get some guidance, so that I'm not just doing this all on my own. So anyway.
Awesome. Everybody okay? All right. Lisa, shall I go on? Okay, thanks. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to... Ouch. So we're going to go on to the next subject here. We're going to go on to the next subject. But again, it all goes together, guys. These are not disjointed subjects. This is like a continuum. So we're going to go on to really the third subject we're going to talk about tonight is incorporation. And those of you who did go to the site, why would we incorporate, and is incorporation biblical? I think is how the questions were posed on the website. And here we go. Everybody know what incorporation is? If you took the prerequisite, you would know, or maybe you just know anyway. In the United States and many countries around the world, incorporation, it's the government creates an entity which is basically a legal person. It can, it's not a person, but it's legally it's a person. It can buy and sell. It can own property. It can take on obligations. It can make promises. It can be sued. That it's a person that can function in business. All right, everybody understand that? And that's what Coca-Cola Incorporated. That's what they do. They can own property, having all that type of stuff. Okay. So let me just give you a few principles here. Is the first thing, it becomes relevant when the church starts to own property. Okay? If the church doesn't own property, right, doesn't have income, doesn't have expense, all right? If the church doesn't have that, there's no need to create a legal person to do that, all right? But once the church starts to take stuff on, like, does the church own a sound system? Did the church sign a lease? Is the church buying a building? Is the church, collecting? Does the church have income? Does the church have a bank account? Once that starts happening, you kind of have a choice to make. Like, who is going to legally own this stuff? Okay? Are we going to create a legal church that can own this stuff? Is the pastor going to own this stuff? Is some good guy in the church going to own this stuff? I mean, somebody has to own something. Like, who's accountable for it, right? The church buys a van. Well, who owns that van? Does the pastor own a van? If it gets in an accident, is he going to get sued? Does the church own the van? If the van gets in an accident, does the church get sued? Like, this becomes relevant when we start doing this stuff. Now, if I'm in an underground church in North Korea and nothing's happening there, and maybe just someone's hungry, I give them a potato or something, it doesn't matter. But in America and countries where a church can actually operate, this matters, okay? And then once you create this legal person, okay, how does it make decisions? How does it make decisions, right? Who are the people who are going to make those, how do we know how it's going to happen? And that's why you start hearing all this talk about boards. That's what boards are. They're the official decision-making process that defines how an organization, makes definitive decisions about what it's going to do. Everybody with me so far on that? Okay. Now, if we don't define it, there's two things that are going to happen. If we don't give definition to that process whereby decisions are being made, then number one, we're going to have the first problem is like appearance of evil. All right? Well, the church just went out and bought a car for the pastor. Well, who made that decision? Who did he make that decision? That's how it goes. And then the second, that's from the outside. That'll be from your congregation or from people on the outside. Questions will come. All right? And then the other thing that'll happen is on the inside, right? On the inside, like I'm the pastor of the church just bought me a car, but I didn't have definition about the decision-making process is not defined and known. I'm going to start having problems like, should this have happened? Was this right? Did this just happen? I mean, did the church just make a decision for me personally? Like, am I covered in this? Like, why do I have this car? Should I have taken it? Was it right, good, fair, and just? Because if, we have egos, but we're not selfish. We're not selfish. You see what I'm saying? Is it right that I have this? And if somebody else asks me, can I defend it? Pastor, why do you have a car? Well, I'm not really sure how it happened. So-and-so thought it was a good idea, and that guy wrote the check. I think it's okay, but I mean, do I really want to be in that situation where I have influence or access over the stuff of the church that I can use for my own personal benefit? That's why these things need to be defined, okay? And the third thing is, this is a principle that's related but I'm going to throw it in here, but it is related.
Sorry, I didn't get what the second thing was.
I'm not sure I did either. Okay. The first thing, the first principle I gave was just property ownership. Who owns this stuff? We're either going to create a legal person, a corporation to own it, or a person has to own it. Somebody has to own it to be accountable. The second thing is, if we haven't defined what that is, but property starts to come into being that's owned by the church without really defining what that is, then we are open to criticism. We're open to criticism from without, like how did that decision get made? And we're open to criticism from within, where it's like, geez, so should I really be, is this really right? I'm saying, was that just my personal preference, or am I covered in it? If I'm in the middle, should I write this check? Who can tell me to write a check? Do I take this offering and spend it on this? Who can tell me to do this? So those who are operating in it, if they have sensitive consciences, can start to be bothered by it also. So that's the second thing. Bad things that can happen without defining this. All right. Now the third principle that I'm throwing in here that could come elsewhere is that criticism, this is like so good, can have a spirit to it, and it can have a substance to it. All right? So we don't ever want to be critical in a bad spirit, all right? And we don't ever want to be subject to an attack from the enemy when people come at us with criticism that has a spirit attached to it that can influence me or obsess me or slow me down in my spiritual progress. I didn't say that the best way, but I don't want to come under the authority of an evil spirit that comes to me in the form of criticism. Okay, so criticism has a spirit to it. We got to be careful. But the second thing is, and this is the good part, is criticism may have a substance to it also. All right? And if criticism comes to me with a bad spirit, but there is a substance to it, I don't want to throw the criticism out because of the spirit. If I've given a place to the enemy because of something I'm doing and something I can correct that will take things out of order and put them back into order, I want to receive the substance of the criticism look at the merit of it, and if I should be making a change in the way we're operating, I want to be able to make that change. Everybody get that? Did you get that, VJ? Edwige, you're with me here? Yeah. Was that clear? Okay, because if we don't look at it that way, here's what will happen, okay? What will happen to better men than you and me, okay, because it does happen, is, again, here my favorite illustration, the pastor gets a car from the church, which is fine with me if that happens. So I'm the pastor of the church. We don't have a clear process. I get two friends of mine, one guy who writes the checks, another guy who I know will support me and say, I think the church ought to buy me a car. They go out and buy me a car. All right, now I got this car. And then you're off the hook, VJ. Andy Castro comes to me and says, what's this all about? And he does it with a rotten spirit. You know what I'm saying? How'd you get this car? Who made that decision? And then I reject his legitimate question because of the spirit attached to it. All right, so I throw out everything because I don't like the spirit he came to me with. But now here's what it is. It's not just this one situation. Now I've already defended myself about this situation, right? And now when the next criticism comes to me, I've already dug a hole for myself, and it's not easy to dig myself out of holes, so I get myself into a pattern or a rhythm where every time something comes to me about a situation, I start identifying it as that's from the devil, right? And now I'm totally insulated. Nobody can touch me because everything that comes to me is now satanic and evil, right? And now I'm like in the strongest position in the world, and nobody talks to me anymore because I have all the answers. See how it is? And then the only person that's left that can get to me is my wife, right? That's how it goes. All right? So that's why this is so important. Yes, sir.
Just making sure.
Send the mic.
Okay, so you're saying incorporating.
I get what you're saying, but I'm trying to tie it into incorporating. Incorporating creates a place to deal with criticism correctly?
Incorporation, correctly done. Let's back it up, Pastor Pete. Incorporation is a broader term, and I'm using it sort of inclusively. If the church is going to own property, it's got to be in somebody's name, either the name of an individual or the name of a corporation. Okay? When it's in the name of an individual, that's shaky. It happens in small churches. It can happen. Maybe it happens in some of your churches. But when it's in the name of an individual, it's like, well, who owns this? All right? I mean, yeah, the church owns this, but no, it's in my name. I can go out and take it to a pawn shop and walk out with $300 in my pocket, right? Is that right or wrong? Well, it's mine. It was mine. So it can be shaky ground. So I lean, and I am the guy who's teaching the course, I lean in the direction of incorporation so that there's a legal person that owns the stuff that the church owns. Now, I use the term inclusively, Pastor Pete. You can incorporate, but normally as part of that, you're going to create bylaws, right, that define how decisions are made by that corporation, And if you do a good job with your bylaws, with clear boards, who's on the board, how did they get there, how do they make decisions, how do they call meetings, then we have a process like you have, and I believe you all have, that defines how that decision is made and who is the bottom line. All right? So that rightly done puts me in a place that gives me the definition, okay? And it protects me from problems of appearance, because when the question is asked, this decision was made this way according to our bylaws. It was done decently and in order. You may not like the process, but it was followed. If we can come up with a better process, please tell us. Maybe this decision, indicates there's a flaw in the process. Let's talk about that. But what was done was not wrong, evil, out of order, or anything like that. We did what we said we would do, and then that's an answer for criticism also when it comes to us. And I think I talk about this later. We might hit this again when I come to it in my notes. But I think I have it somewhere in here that, like, I've seen it not hundreds of times, 10 times, 5 times, a few times. In the course of it, people will come to you and they will be troubled. Like, how did this happen? Okay? And it's like the greatest thing in the world. Guys, you want to know how many people had a shot at that decision before it was made? We got 6 trustees that voted for it. And then we had 11 people on the Board of Elders that had a chance to veto that decision. They didn't. So 17 leaders in the church had a shot at this, and they let it go through. That's how this decision was made. And people generally say, oh, I see, thank you for that. It's amazing how criticism vaporizes, because people just want to be secure. They don't want to be at the mercy of anybody in the church, whether it's the pastor or somebody in the business office making decisions. You know what I'm saying? That's the other thing. People will start I think we hit this again, and we'll hit it again, but people will start playing off people in different things in their, Pastor Pete, you know this. You're in the youth ministry. Oh, Pastor Pete made this decision, but Pastor Schaller never would have done that. I mean, you know what I'm saying? That's how he's extreme. That's how it goes. And this is the attack on the church, and that's why we have this course to help us with this stuff. Okay? Now, so those are some principles. I want us to understand those principles because they're valid and legitimate. Yes, ma'am.
I was just thinking, like you say, that if you reject the criticism because of the spirit it comes with,
Yeah.
It makes you kind of immune to other,
Right.
and you interpret it as satanic. But is there a hardening of the heart involved too? You think, or not necessarily?
On the heart of the, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you're back to, what happens, Helena, is how do I say this the right way? Part of it is I want to borrow your chair. That's my problem right now. I'm a bit distracted. But you sit there. See, I'm insecure in my ministry, right? And I think that if I start showing weakness, that my ministry is going to be, I'm going to lose my authority, and people it's going to be hindered. I'm going to lose what I have. If I admit I made a mistake, you know what I'm saying, then I think people, I'll start to lose the facade of who people think I am or who I think I am, right? So yeah, there is a hardening of the heart when you think you've got to maintain this thing and can never be wrong. But what you find out is when you're weak, that's when you're the strongest. You know what I'm saying? When people come to you, I got a problem with this. Hey, you know what? You're right. I feel bad about that. I'm going to correct that. Thank you very much for that. You just increased your authority. You didn't lose it. So that's there is a hardening of the heart, or a misunderstanding of the relationship between me and my authority and God and His authority and how this thing's going to happen and what people are really doing in my church, Or in fear that people in my church, like I got to hold my church together by controlling people, otherwise I'm going to lose them, And yeah, you can hold the church together with fear. You can do that, It'll work to an extent. It doesn't work in greater grace, but it's worked well in Islam. They got millions of people in that religion because of fear, you know? Okay. Now, I'm going to illustrate something that I just illustrated kind of in a different way. And I think it's a good time for another break. All right, this will be a 15-minute break. 8:05 we'll come back, and then we'll go till 9.